Today's video is sponsored by Surfshark VPN. More from them in a bit. When last we looked at our good friend Charles Tyson Yerkes in a video that I'll link in the description below, if I remember, his reputation in America was in the proverbial tatters. Worse, public opinion was turning against the massive corruption that was the bedrock of American business practice. Theodore Roosevelt became president in 1901, promising to clean house. However, you can't keep a good man down, and Yerkes was very good. At conning people out of their money, that is. So it was inevitable that this would only be a temporary setback. He just needed to find a new market for his talents. So he looked across the Atlantic. Yerkes was a frequent visitor to London, and it seems very likely that he had been watching public transport developments in the city with a keen eye. 1890 had seen the opening of the City and South London Railway, a novel but highly successful new kind of railway. An electrically powered deep-level subway, or tube. This led to a kind of tube mania, with dozens of proposals for new underground lines over the next decade. Most would go nowhere, but those that received approval became the basis of the modern London Underground. At some point, Yerkes made the acquaintance of one R.W. Perks, a solicitor with a financial interest in underground lines, who would essentially become his agent in the UK. He drew Yerkes' attention to two railways in particular. One was the Charing Cross, Euston and Hampstead Railway. This was to run from the northern suburbs through the West End, but had stalled due to a lack of investment. The other was the Metropolitan District Railway, in which Perks was a major shareholder. The district was one of the oldest underground lines, having first opened in 1868. It was not a very financially successful railway. It had been very expensive to build, and by 1870 it was on the verge of bankruptcy. In desperation, James Stats Forbes was made chairman in 1872. Forbes had a reputation for saving failing lines. He was a charming and cautious man, but he could not be called adventurous. While he was undoubtedly the man for the job at the time, by the end of the century the shareholders were clamouring for someone more dynamic. New tube lines were being dug across the capital, and here was the district operating with 30-year-old steam locomotives. Yerkes smelt blood. Of course, railway speculators aren't such a risk these days, but that doesn't mean you're safe from shady characters, and that's where today's sponsor comes in. Surfshark VPN is a handy little tool to keep you safe online. It encrypts your data and reroutes it through their secure servers, protecting you from snoopers and data thieves. What's excellent is that Surfshark has servers in over 100 countries, so you can also use it to appear to be in another country, and the websites you visit need be none the wiser. In this manner, you can get access to content from other countries, you can get around censorship, and you can even get bargains online by taking advantage of region-specific pricing. Surfshark can be used on unlimited devices too, so that's even more money you could save. Even better, if you follow the link in the description below and enter the code JAGO, you can get 3 months free with a 2-year plan, and there's a 30-day money-back guarantee. All in all, it's a much wiser investment than anything sold to you by a smooth-talking 19th century businessman. Speaking of which, in 1900, our boy moved to Britain and began forming a syndicate, the Metropolitan District Electric Traction Company. The syndicate was primarily made up of American businessmen. There were plenty of people like Yerkes who had seen the way the wind was blowing in America and looked to Britain. The main stated aim of the company was to electrify the district railway, including constructing a new power station at Lots Road in Chelsea. Yerkes and the traction company bought out the district's shares, getting effective control by March 1901. First order of business was to give Forbes the boot, and there was much rejoicing. The traction company started taking an interest in other schemes too. These were the Brompton and Piccadilly Circus Railway, the Great Northern and Strand Railway, the Baker Street and Waterloo Railway, and the aforementioned Charing Cross, Euston and Hampstead Railway. They were going to need a bigger budget. And so a new syndicate was formed with the help of the Old Colony Trust and the Speyer brothers, financial whizzes all. You may have heard of this syndicate before. It was called Underground Electric Railways of London. While Yerkes was the instigator, the monetary mastermind was Edgar Speyer, an expert in finance with experience in railway matters. That gave investors some confidence, but there were doubters. For one thing, the financing seemed a little off. Not necessarily dodgy at that stage, but certainly unnecessarily complicated. When the district was its own man, so to speak, it was a statutory company with transparency. Now UERL was in control, it was much harder to see what was actually going on. But that wasn't Yerkes' problem. He had seemingly met his match, and his match was the Met. The district's rivals were the Metropolitan Railway. The two companies had had bad blood almost from the start. The district had been founded as an ally, but disagreements over money had caused the two to split. The Metropolitan had appointed Edward Watkin as their chairman around the same time that Forbes had been brought into the district, and the two men were long-standing enemies, which did not help matters. The district and Metropolitan had both accepted the necessity of electrification. At this time, the different underground lines had used whatever method of electrification best suited them. There was no standardization between lines. But the Metropolitan and District shared tracks on the Inner Circle route, which is now the Circle line. So they had joined forces and agreed to adopt the GANS system. This used alternating current delivered from overhead wires. They agreed upon this in January 1901. Well, of course, Yerkes showed up in March, and his representatives told the Metropolitan that, in Yerkes' words, he would not put $1 into the GANS system. The thing is, whatever else you could say about the man, he knew what he was talking about when it came to electrification. His elevated railways in Chicago had been successfully electrified using direct current delivered by a conductor rail, and he saw no reason to change what worked. Conductor rails were already in use on the City and South London, Central London and Waterloo and City lines, and even the early experimental trains on the Inner Circle had used them. What was more, Charles had a whole team of engineers at his disposal with the knowledge and experience to back him up. Still, the Met weren't going to be pushed around by some Yankee upstart and refused to accept. So Yerkes came up with a new plan. If he couldn't beat them, join them. Oh, sorry, I read that wrong. If he couldn't beat them, force them to join him. While Yerkes was charming and intelligent, that was the front for a ruthless aggression that he barely attempted to hide. For instance, his response in Chicago to allegations of buying out councilmen was, "When they say there is bribery in the city council, why not give us the 50-year franchise we want and stop the bribery?" Absolutely shameless. In a similar spirit, he hoped to wear the Metropolitan Railway down with this dispute. As the Met was losing passengers to the Central London Railway, he reckoned they were weakened. So he presented two proposals to his rivals. One was that he would electrify both railways in full, and the Metropolitan would use the district's equipment. The other was that the district would take full control of the Met's operations. In both cases, it seems very likely that he intended these as a prelude to a full takeover. He gave them a fortnight to mull it over. And they said no. Unreservedly. The thing was, the Metropolitan was not like other underground railways. It was a considerably larger company than any of the others Yerkes had taken over. A well-established railway with lines out into the countryside. So, they argued, there was no way the traction company could afford what they were proposing. In those days, duelling had been made illegal and rap battles hadn't yet been invented, so the rivals took to writing letters to the Times. Yerkes accused the Met of dithering and said that the GANS system was untested. The Met's secretary, the excellently named G.H. Whistle, denied the accusation. Yerkes simply restated that the Met were wasting time with this dispute. I'll be honest, it wasn't the most exciting back and forth I've ever read. In the end, the whole thing went to arbitration. The Metropolitan delayed matters by not having their expert witness ready in time. The traction company, on the other hand, gave a virtuoso performance. They presented expert after expert, all of whom argued that direct current was the best, if not the only, practical way to power an underground line. After 12 days, the decision was reached. Yerkes would have his way. So it was that the Metropolitan and District would be powered by DC via conductor rails, as they still are to this day. But it seems that Yerkes hadn't completely given up on the concept of a takeover and suggested that he might supply the power for both lines, or possibly they could strike some sort of deal over running rights. No dice. The Metropolitan would stay independent all the way until 1933, one of the only underground companies not ultimately absorbed by Underground Electric Railways of London. Still, Yerkes was just getting started on his empire in Britain. While he was fighting with the Metropolitan, he was preparing to sink to the lowest possible depths. Quite literally. Well, I hope you enjoyed this confrontational tale from the tube. We will return to Yerkes, hopefully in the not-too-distant future, to look at what else he was getting up to. If you did enjoy this video, please do click the like and consider subscribing for more. I would like, as I always do, to thank my donors on Ko-fi and Patreon and here on YouTube for your ever-generous support. You are the conductor rail to my direct current. I would also like to thank Surfshark for once again sponsoring this video. Click on the link in the description below to take advantage of their generous offer. And I will see you all again very soon for another tale from the tube.